Rob Halford, what can we learn from this wonderful singer? Many things by listening to him throughout various live performances, but in this video I want to break down a little bit of his compression technique, his distortion technique, and how that blends into mixed voice and things like that. So come join me. Alright, so I want to talk about something I recently talked about, which is mixed voice and compression, a little bit of these things, but more importantly with Rob Halford here, his distortion. Now, as I've been studying some of these things, as some of you know, I lost my voice for quite a while due to health reasons, and as I get it back, I'm experimenting with a lot of spaces and trying to find the healthiest way to do things and the most longevity, sustainability, all kinds of stuff like that. With distortion, we're trying to find some of those things. Even in exercises, you might kind of find them and then try to go perform them or do them live and get really tense, and things like that are happening. And one of the most important things that I find that a lot of people run into, and I might myself, even in rehearsals with bands, is that getting tense, you'll get into a compression space or a distortional space where almost every time you're doing it, you're physically arrested. You're like, ugh, and you're like, your whole body has to kind of keep doing this thing. And as you're doing something like that, it's kind of like lifting a lot of weight. And, even by doing it a half an hour to an hour, after a while, you're going to, and it's just, your range starts to drop, and that compression that you're kind of finding for a lower distortion, or for maybe the distortion I'm talking about, this problematic area, the musculature continues to swell in that area, and everything gets more and more tense like this and swollen, and then it's hard to get back to your head voice in higher areas because everything's like, no, we need to stay here like this. So one of the great things about listening to Rob Halford is that I looked up a live performance, 1983, at the US Fest. I'm not sure where it was. I didn't really care. I was just listening to his wonderful performance and their wonderful performance. And one of the great things I found with him and a couple other people that I've been listening to, David Draymond, for example, is that not only are they distorting throughout a lot of the set, and sometimes people like David Draymond, for example, you're not going to hear as much distortion as you hear in the studio versions because it's tiring and it's taxing on the voice, but is that not only are they distorting throughout a lot of the set, they're fucking walking around. They're doing things. They're pointing to the audience and moving around. They are not in any way getting locked into a coordination where they have to bear down and they have to go like this every time. So that is important as you're continuing to practice these things, to recognize that if you are practicing or doing something that is really physically kind of taxing, most likely you're doing something kind of incorrectly, or something that's not going to be very easy to do on stage or very sustainable. And case in point, again, watch some of these other masters like Rob Halford here do this and continue to just walk around and live his best life. So one of the places we want to start with this, and I've recently talked about this too, so sorry if you're hearing it again, but think about the voice like a tube, all up and down like this, and the vocal cords kind of being down here at the bottom. All this space above here is malleable, it's movable, it's shapeable, not just down here. So when you're thinking about the voice only being kind of located down here, and that's where everything's happening, and that's where all the different sounds, that's not the case at all. Case in point, even on a simple level, if you find the false chords above, the kind of fatter place to help you from choking and dying, those are responsible for some distortion, but most of the time when you're really utilizing that space, you're getting close to the vocal cords, you're compressing close to the vocal cords, and we're starting to run into some of those problems that I talked about. Doesn't mean they're never going to make any distortional sounds or be utilized, but if you're kind of using them, I'm going to make an example here, if you're kind of using those only to get your distortion, it's not going to let your voice go very high, and it's probably going to get tiring after a while. So as we experiment with this, or even if you're still trying to find mixed voice, keep thinking about this whole tube-like thing, or a rocket ship, or a spaceship, and everything goes like this as you go higher. Everything goes to like the nose cone, it goes to a needle point as we go higher, but we have different compression points that we can find. So compression meaning holding back airflow. Now we can find it above if you start to search for that. E vowels usually work very well for this. There's the false chords I was talking about. But now if we try to think about more of this nasal pharyngeal space up here, if we can find a compression point up there, not only will we find a better and healthier distortion, similar to the Rob Halford thing I'm going to show you here, but we can also find the mixed voice compression point, which means that we're compressing in a different place. So the tension that wants to build down here in the vocal cords as we move towards our bridge, ma, 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 and then break, that tension is trying to let you know that something needs to shift and that pressure needs to move to another location, or you're just going to break apart and not be able to maintain chord closure. So get to know that pressure that builds right here, and get to know when you're building that pressure, even if different vowels or words are making you build that pressure, because it's trying to let you know, hey, this ain't working. We got to do something different. Okay? I think that was Charles Barkley. This is terrible. So get to know that. It's a good thing to pay attention to. It's not just like, oh, I'm tense in my throat or whatever. Get to know that because it's trying to let you know you need to hand that pressure over. And so at first, it might very well feel like you're handing that pressure over to another space. And what I'm meaning by that too is that at first, it's not going to be powerful. It's not going to be loud. It's not going to be amazing. It's probably not going to sound or feel like you thought it was going to feel like. But if you can maintain chord closure, that's everything. Once I find that place, I can move easily up into head and back down into chest. But I'm still lending that I'm still finding my compression space higher. Now everybody has different methods to do this. I can try to take you through a couple different places or a couple different sounds and stuff, but the most important thing is the perception of what's happening and the knowledge of what I'm trying to tell you here about what needs to happen in terms of the movement. What's happening on a placement level, if you pay attention to your placement, where the voice is resonating, is that your placement is moving backwards. Your resonance and that pressure that we're talking about is literally moving backwards so that it can be allowed to go behind your soft palate and up into your nasal pharyngeal space or your head voice. So if you are jumping from that kind of happens, but most of the time when people get tense, their voice drops and then the pressure builds and then they have to utilize this because blah, 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 blah. Make sense? So that, if you pay attention to your placement, that's moving backwards to allow that pressure, because tension and pressure that's the singing game. It's okay, there's pressure here, there's tension here, I need to build resonance, etc., etc. So if you take something like UNG, a French on sound, and we move like this through our bridge. Now I'm a baritone, so I'll try to go a little bit higher here, but my bridge is at G4, which is typical for baritones. So if I go right here, close to the bridge already, and I use UNG, I will start down here, where the pressure kind of is sitting near my vocal cords, and then I will move and allow that pressure to move up into the nose. The higher you go, the more you're going to be bringing in head voice resonance, or head voice is going to keep creeping its way in there. If it's not, that means you're going, and you keep building. You're going to know. It's going to feel like the elevator is stuck right here and you can't go any higher. I'll show you the difference again. Instantly you hear the difference. Now keep in mind, I'm not flipping. There's no bridge there. Hear that? So I'm letting that tension move up into there. Now, let's get into some of the Rob Halford thing. Now, he used mixed voice. He also used just straight up head voice. I'm not sure if he knew about these things. I'm not sure if he trained for these things. But one of the most important things I wanted to touch upon is the distortion. As we find a little bit of that mixed voice, or we're just experimenting with distortion, we can see, if we watch like something like this. I think this is Living After Midnight. Start again. You can hear that he's almost speaking there. Now that's not a discredit to anything. That's meaning he knows what the hell he's doing. So he can do that all day. If I go, oh, and I start to find this up here, I start to find that distortion up there. It's all happening in a pharyngeal space. Then I put words through that, even if it's monotone. All night I'm gonna live it up, live it up. I can do that all day long, and that's a little bit of what's happening here. When he goes a little bit higher, then he has to get into more of a compressed space. But for the most part, if you watch a lot of these sets, he's staying in a space like that where he can distort all day long, and that's the main reason I wanted to make this video, because David Draymond's doing a little bit of that in a little bit of a heavier way as well, and a lot of these masters are finding a distortion and a compression that's easy to do and that's above the vocal cords. All night I'm gonna live it up. There I have to compress. Live it up! Live it up! But for the most part, if I just stay in that zone and I find that distortion, all night I'm gonna live it up. Taking, I don't know the lyrics. So anyway, I know it was very fast. I'm happy to teach you if you reach out to me. Sterling Ravi Jackson at gmail.com. I'm happy to give lessons. I'm happy to teach over on Patreon as well. A lot of these lessons I extend, not this one in particular, because I like to give Patreon people more of a view into this and more behind the scenes stuff like that. I've been sharing some of my personal music and some of my new projects that are coming out on Patreon, things like that. So if you want to support me there, I really appreciate that as well. Anyway, keep trying to find this space I'm talking about. Think about it like this. If you can find a compression point or even a distortional space that you can take the whole way into head voice and back down, you'll be right there with the Chris Cornells of the world and all kinds of people like the wonderful Rob Halford here. Let's listen to another second of this. You hear that once again? I come alive in the neon lights. I come alive in the neon lights. Once again, can move my neck. Oh, and it's not making me bear down like this. Therein lies the goal. I hope this helped. Thank you for joining me. Bye.